Hi there, Year 10. Welcome to your 9th lesson now on A Christmas Carol. Now, we are really working our way through the novella here, and we find ourselves in this lesson, content-wise, at the end of stave 3. Now, this session I want to hone in on two very brief but very significant characters within the novella. Now, they are silent characters, but visibly, they are potent catalysts in Scrooge's metamorphosis. So, new page in your exercise books, Who Are Ignorance and Want, Lesson 9. This will coincide with the Tuesday's Edulink and Google Classroom lesson that will be posted with the activities to coincide with what I discuss. So let's get on with it. Now we need to start with some context because, as ever, to truly understand the significance of these characters, we must start with what Dickens felt around the idea of childhood and education. Okay, childhood, education and poverty, really. So the first thing to make note of is that Dickens was a firm and unwavering believer in the great power of education to remedy many of society's flaws and injustices. So, as I've popped up there, Dickens believed that the only way to break the cycle of poverty, that's a really key phrase there, that was abundantly clear in his world in Victorian England, was to provide all people with access to education. I suppose this is why, as a teacher, I become frustrated with pupils that are disengaged, because it is often those that need education the most to be able to break out of the limitations of their social class. So I myself am from a working class household. I was born into a working class household, but I very much pursued my education as a key means of not only sort of breaking free of some of the unfortunate circumstances of my childhood, but also of moving up into this state of professionalism through my education, through my degree, my teaching qualification, my experience. I now would be considered middle class. Now, I'm not so concerned with the labels or the power structures of society in that way, but I am just such a firm believer that education is your key. And whilst we are not in the classroom, we are still learning. The fact that you are sat here with me in this internet space, this internet classroom, learning, okay? This novella is not just a Christmas tale, a tale you read around Christmas and then passively place on the bookcase for another year. It carries, like an inspector calls, such strong didactic moral teaching that we learn, we grow, we gain power. With knowledge is power. I've gone off on a bit of a speech there, sorry, but you know how I feel about this. Getting in the classroom, getting those brains ticking, learning, growing, advancing, whether it's an online classroom or a physical one. The point is, in Dickens' time, there was such social class divides within the Victorian era that the working classes had very little education indeed. Very little. Children as young as 5 were coerced into the world of work as chimney sweeps. Okay? Young children as well, unfortunately coerced into the sex industry. Again, as a means of sustaining themselves where no other were apparent. So it's very clear, and I'm on my PowerPoint again, it's clear that education plays an integral and important role in what we call secondary socialization. That means away from your first teachings from your family and in a school environment, okay, learning values and how to socialize with others and, language skills. It's absolutely integral. And just think for a moment, you don't need to write this down, but just take a moment to pause the video and think, what opportunities, do you have as a result of being at school? How might a good education affect the jobs that you can do in the future? Why is education, employment or training now compulsory in the in the UK up until the age of 18? Why have the government made that compulsory, that an individual should continue in some capacity to learn, whether that's at college, university, sixth form, learning on the job, in a training course, up until the age of 18? Why is that now apparent? Just take a moment to consider these questions. What would your life be like if you didn't have access to education in any capacity? Pause the video and think. Okay, now that you understand just as clearly as I've said that education is the key to alleviating social divide, to gaining back power, influence, stability, then we need to understand why Scrooge has included these two strange characters, fleeting but significant. Now this starts on page 89 in your novella, so you're going to want to have that extract that would have been attached on the work available. And we are going from the moment where it says, and this is towards the end, from the foldings of its robe, and the its there is the ghost of Christmas present. It brought two children, wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable. They knelt down at its feet and clung upon the outside of its garment. They were a boy and a girl, yellow, meagre, ragged, scowling, wolfish. Okay? And when Scrooge sees this, he started back appalled. And the ghost reiterates that these figures are man's. They are humanity's. Humanity has created. This boy is ignorance. This girl is want. Beware them both and all of their degree. But most of all, beware this boy. For on his brow I see that written which is doom, unless the writing be erased. More on that in a moment. But first things first, the hideous children that appear from the folding of the ghost's robe, they are described as wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable. So we have here the use of these negative, derogatory adjectives listed in quick succession to really hyperbolically, exaggerate the negative outcomes of a lack of education. They're called children, and yet they display the marks of age, of wear and tear, of pain and suffering. They are ragged and they are man's. Okay, these are humanity's children. So they're not really just two children, just any two children. They are metaphors for all of the children that are abused within the systems in place in Victorian England. That, the chimney sweep sent out, the harlot's curse. The children that are not able to experience childhood, because their parents require them to be employed in some sort of job. It'd be low skilled, repetitive, hard to bring in income. And remember, very large families in the Victorian era. So the children are poor and ragged, that much is clear. But they indeed personify the plight of what I like to call the underbelly of society in Dickens' contemporary world. So it's those that the middle class, the upper class, those more privileged individuals within the hierarchy would prefer to ignore. The underbelly, what's hidden beneath, hidden away, ignored. And that, these are the children, the qualities, ignorance and want of the working or lower classes. Now, as I said, ignorance, and you're going to have to write down a definition for this in a moment, but if someone describes you as ignorant, you are by definition lacking in knowledge, lacking in information. You have not received the correct education to be able to make informed, educated judgments. Unfortunately, we still live in a world where many people embrace ignorance, almost reject education, and pursue a life less than fruitful. Now, want is the quality of needing, of wanting something. And we know that the underbelly, the lower social classes, were always in a state of want. They did not have their basic needs met. Okay, within the hierarchy of needs, even the basic needs were not met for them. Shelter, security, food, nourishment. Okay, so that is what want is. Now, those two qualities are basically apparent within the Victorian era because there is no welfare state. Okay, there is no education for all. There is no compulsory education up until the age of 18. And certainly the education system was not to the quality that it is now. Okay, so think of them as two fleeting characters, but as hugely significant in the overall didactic teaching of this novella. So I would have a quick go at these very brief activities to summarise what I've just told you. Number one, quickly Google the two words ignorance and want, and do pop down a definition that makes sense to you in your books. It might be you rewind back on this video and listen to mine and use that, whatever really makes sense for you. So once you've done that, you want to move on. Why do you think, though, that Dickens chose to name the children in this way? What comment is he trying to make about Victorian England? Okay, what was he saying needed to be changed, needed to be remedied, so that we could all move forward? So that Scrooge can, but remember, he's just a character, so that the readers can too. And then lastly, you're going to pause after this. In this scene, the ghost tells Scrooge that these children are the creation of man. That means society, not just Scrooge. He's not the only one accountable here. Why do you think Dickens wanted the reader, and that could be even now, a modern reader, to feel involved, to feel accountable here? What comment, is he trying to make about collective responsibility? So give yourself just 5 minutes, a quick sentence or two for these answers, just to summarise what we've done so far. So pause now. Okay, so this is the thing that I was effectively reading to you a moment before. You should be annotating, you should be, writing down these key quotes in your book as we go. I've spoken about the adjectives at the start, but I just wanted to hone into a few more things. Look at the top there. It says they knelt down at its feet and clung upon the outside of its garment. Now remember what this ghost represents, okay? Christmas spirit and the virtues of Christmas time. If the children are seen as having clung to its garment, then, clung is quite a desperate gesture, isn't it? It's quite a persistent gesture as well, if you're clinging on to something. So it really suggests the great desperation and the plight that these figures are in. Okay, they are seeking desperately and persistently for assistance. Okay, and it's just ironic, isn't it, that the only person that seems to notice them is actually a supernatural figure. It's a ghost, this ghost time is nearly up as well. It's nearly gone. It's aging as we read this. Its hair's turning grey. So again, it shows the lack of kind of human concern for these figures. I just wanted to look at the second bit I've highlighted. It says they're yellow, meagre, ragged, scowling, wolfish, and of the whole succession of negative lexical choices there. It mentions that they are prostrate too in their humility. Now that little bit there is strange. It means prostrate means you're lying down or you're stretched out. Now that means it's a metaphor here. Humility means modesty. So they don't have any modesty. They are lacking in modesty. They are not graceful. They have no manners. They're not presented well, or well put together. So again, it shows how their childhood, how their innocence has all been stamped out due to society's ills and its inequalities. It even mentions here, look, where graceful youth should have filled their features. They should look young, beautiful, should be fresh. Instead, they have a stale and shriveled hand, like that of age, that's twisted them and pulled them into shreds. So really negative, violent, hyperbolic imagery here to show the loss of innocence and youth. Now, it's so interesting that Scrooge is absolutely appalled by this, when he is the exact same individual at the start of the novella that would have been happy to send them to the workhouses and to the prisons. Okay? He had zero concern for the plight of the poor. He was so apathetic. Okay? So this scene is so educational for Scrooge because it gives him a glimpse into the true reality of the society that he has closed himself off of. Okay? Now the ghost warns him that he should beware ignorance the most because ignorance is sealing his fate right now. He needs to be re-educated to embrace these new lessons and then to be reborn. So, you again are going to want to answer these questions nice and quickly, okay? I know these are extra activities, but these are all as the top sets to stretch your learning. Okay, now that extra just there that I've gone over, I really want you to quickly summarize in 1 or 2 sentences my questions here. So to start with, how does Dickens use imagery to make ignorance and want appear shocking and repulsive? And why is it all so over the top? Why is it all so hyperbolic? You know, could it have to do with the urgency of the message? The fact that these are children, okay, and they need to be given their youth and their childhood. Okay, and then I'm not going to read them all through, but I've given you some hints there as well. So really quick, pop the questions down, give me your answers. If you need to rewind that video back, I've basically answered most of these anyway, okay, in what I've said. So just make sure that you are analysing these points to me and jotting down some answers. Pause the video now, here we go. Okay, so let's sum it up now, okay? Because I don't want to go on for too much longer. I know this is your first lesson back after half term and I don't seek to overwhelm. But after all, in summary, we are told, along with Scrooge, to beware of both of these children, but especially ignorance. So why do we think then that Dickens believes that this is the worst of the two social evils? Okay, let's answer this. Remember, we are in the land of the Industrial Revolution. We are in the world of Malthus, that respected academic and economist who argued that the growth of the population would outstrip its ability to provide food for everyone. And so he felt there should be population control through starvation and disease. And who do you think he wanted to go first? The underbelly of society. Okay? Dickens is trying to explore a more humanitarian viewpoint of philosophy. He wants to extend compassion to these people, okay, that the Industrial Revolution and figures like Malthus failed to do. Okay? So first things first, in summary, Dickens is utilising these children, these characters, as vehicles, as things to carry out his passionate humanitarian beliefs on the power of education. Okay, how it can start to break down society's great divides. Now, of course, these children appall Scrooge, but they are intended to do that. They are intended to shock and appall us, the readers, as well. They are there to wake us up, to shake us up out of our apathy and our blinkered state. We must act to remedy these inequalities. Now, I love in this scene that the ghost also uses Scrooge's very misguided choices about the workhouses and the prisons, and he flings them right back at him. And he does this after he's seen the children. So structurally, that's important as well, because you look at the hideous children, then he's reminded of what he thought about them. Okay, and it reiterates the theme of collective responsibility as a whole for Scrooge and for the reader. Now, most importantly here, what Dickens is doing is prioritising eradicating ignorance via education. Because when you're educated and you possess knowledge and skills, aspirations, that social ill of want, of being in a state of want, will therefore be naturally tackled, because if you're in employment, you can provide for yourself, you can create stability, and then we break the cycle of poverty. So in summary, education is the route out of poverty, according to Dickens. Now, Dickens felt this stronger than anyone else, or as strong as anyone else, because if we link these ideas to context, and I just love this quote from Dickens, he indeed did move to London, as we know. His father was imprisoned, prison. I can't say that word. It's very difficult this morning. Off for a week, lose the power of speech. Anyway, because of his living situation, Scrooge was taken out of education quite young to work in a factory. He was pasting labels on bottles, a very repetitive activity. And when he moved to London, he was really surprised and upset to not be sent to school. And he said, "What would I have given if I had anything to give? To have been sent back to any other school, to have been taught anything, anywhere." And there we have it. Why Miss Tuttlestone gets so annoyed when people sigh and moan, "Oh, this is long, boring, boo." Because if you didn't have access to that education, okay, you are limiting your future. Okay, you are limiting your opportunities. And education is just the key to everything, to a better world, to eradicating ignorance. Imagine if, I'm sorry to bring up such a hideous moment, but this is so relevant. Okay, the killing of a black man for apparently forging a $20 bill, which was not even correct, by a white privileged police officer in America. That white privileged police officer was acting from a place of ignorance, to assume certain derogatory or negative qualities based upon the colour of that man's skin. Okay, and at the moment the protests continue in America because he is, the officer is being charged with murder, but in the 3rd degree. Okay, as if he didn't mean to do it. And so we see, unfortunately, how class, race, gender divides still prevail, and why we must strive to be educated and to tackle ignorance. Okay, so I really hope that's made that clear for you using that contemporary example. Okay, ignorance is still alive and well. Alright, so if you have any questions, let me know. I've covered some really complex things here. Ignorance and want are probably the things that some people find most complicated. So please drop me a comment in the comment section below if you found it helpful, or if you want some more information. I'm there for you. Just let me know. Have a great day.